Fight on, family. Preston's Paradise here. Can USC keep the good times rolling as they're competing against a familiar face, man? A man that us USC fans know very well, head coach Clay Helton and his Georgia Southern Eagles. Let's get into the preview. Now, since Lincoln Riley took over the head coaching job at USC, a name that has been very polarizing in the fan base has been Clay Helton, right? And I went on social media. I went on my Twitter account. You could find me on Twitter, Fight on Preston. And I put a tweet out. I kind of, wanted to get feedback from the fan base. Wanted to get the pulse of the fan base as this game, was going to take place in a couple of days this Saturday. And really see how everybody was at. See how the mind state was of bringing, Clay Helton coming back to the Coliseum, coming back with an opponent. And a USC team that we feel has a lot of promise this upcoming season, right? And, there was negativity and there was a lot of positivity as well. This is college football. This is fandom, right? A lot of the stuff you see here on the screen is utterly hilarious. You got people blaming the death of their pets on Clay Helton. You got people blaming, the failures of their romantic relationships on Clay Helton. But at the end of the day, the positive, the negative that you see on the screen, it really made me have a new perspective. I personally are a person that didn't really have a strong opinion on Clay Helton, positive or negative. And I really feel that way in regards to a lot of the coaches, from sanction era to between the sanction era and the Lincoln Riley era, whether you want to talk about a guy like Lane Kiffin, a guy like Sark, a guy like Clay Helton, Coach O. A lot of these guys were dealing with a lot, right? There's comments on this page that talk about we should be focused on the NCAA and regardless to what Clay Helton did, right? I agree with that. There's also people on this, screen that say, he set the program back 5 years. I didn't like the fact that we played soft. I didn't like the fact that, our punter was the captain of the team. Obviously you got Bryce Young, up here, recruiting issues, those pipelines, those local pipelines. But also, this is a head coach that won USC their last Pac-12 championship, right? This is a head coach that, what was great when it came to the community, gave back to a lot of people around the university, talked, players, fans, families through tough times. And was a coach that really tried his best, right? So at the end of the day, I'm going to be very interested to see the type of reception that Clay gets as, the game starts and, and the warm-up start and everything. He's back out there on that Coliseum field. But at the end of the day, man, the team has to compete. We have to continue the domination, and we have to continue to play like we're the team that I think we are this upcoming season. So very excited to get underway against Georgia Southern and Clay Helton, man. Welcome back, but we got to spoil your return to the Coliseum. Let's get into the team preview. All right, some info and light keys on Georgia Southern right here. They were 8-4 last season in the Sun Belt Conference. This is a team that competed in every game, man. Won a lot of games last year in that conference. Lost by 11 points to Boise State early on in the year, where their quarterback J.C. French had 322 passing yards. He went on to have 17 touchdowns and 11 interceptions in all of last season, right? So, is a risk taker, is also a pretty athletic quarterback. And they do a lot of funky stuff formationally. Like, they're going to kind of play around, try to get the defense off guard, test the discipline of the defense, right? Clay Helton, he's got a pretty good bunch of kids right here. There's a fair amount of high D1 talent on this roster. The guys that transferred from the SEC, the guys that transferred from the ACC, Power 4 conferences all across America. I'll get into those guys in a couple minutes here. But they're a very competitive team. Like, they're not going to lay down. And they're, best believe, they're going to be playing for Clay Helton, right? I talked about the nothing to lose with Missouri State last week. This is another situation, right? Nothing to lose. They just dealt with a beating to Fresno State. I'm going to talk a little bit about that as well at the end of this video. But they got nothing to lose, man. They know their coach. This is where he, last was at. They're going to be playing for him, especially if the reception is weird, in regards to Clay Helton. If people are booing, if it's not as polite as we think it might be, then that's just going to fire up these guys even more, right? They're going to be playing for their coach all day, every day, but especially this Saturday. So watch out on that front. But in regards to some guys on offense that I personally have my eyes on, running back O.J. Arnold, little shifty guy out of the backfield. Wide receiver Camden Brown. This is a big, strong wide receiver, number 4, 6'2", 200 pounds. And he's an Auburn transfer, man. Like, I saw some film of him when he was at Auburn, making big-time plays in the SEC, right? So this dude is not a slouch. We're going to have to watch where he's at. Wide receiver Josh Dallas, a little shiftier of a receiver, 6'1", 200 pounds, dependable hands, runs good routes. That's another guy to keep an eye on. On the defensive side of the ball, Jaden Davis is a sophomore defensive back, little longer, a little rangy at 6'1", 180 pounds. Had 10 total tackles for this team last week against Fresno State. Now, I'm going to talk a little about Fresno State. I'm not going to take too long on this preview. I'm not going to take too long about Georgia Southern. I expect domination and destruction. If we are the 9-3, 10-2 team that I believe we are, then we got to go crazy this Saturday against this team, for various reasons, right? Now, 3 of the top 4 tacklers on Georgia Southern's team last week were secondary players. Now, that's indicative of them having not a very good defensive line, right? They have below average defensive line and a below average offensive line. So we got to take advantage of that, right? Like, we have to run the ball down their throat. And I want to see an improvement from the offensive line, right? We started that game last week. I know it was a good game, 73-13, but there were some things that we could have tightened up on the right side of that offensive line. And I just want to see more consistent from these guys, as well as more consistency on the defensive side of the ball, man. We got to tune it up. This is the last week. Then we got a big matchup, big conference matchup against Purdue going on the road. So if we got to continue this momentum, continue, tweaking stuff and becoming better as a team at technique and repetition, right? As far as defensive linemen, I like what I see a little bit from Jacob Ferguson, a defensive line, 6'3", 240-pound edge. Could give you some issues, but he really shouldn't give us any issues, right? This is a team last week. They went up against Fresno State, obviously lost that game, gave up 7 rushes of 20 yards or more against Fresno State, right? We saw the running game. I don't know what to call it. I don't know if I call it a 3-headed monster or a 3-headed dragon. Y'all let me know in the comments like what the proper terminology you think it should be. We might have a 4-headed monster or a 4-headed dragon when you talk about King Miller and the type of performance he put on last week and what he could possibly do, coming off the bench this season, right? Averaging, the most yards per carry in camp. But Fresno State put up 7 rushes of 20 yards or more on this defense. I think we got a better running back room than Fresno State, right? They gave up 350 rushing yards to Fresno State, right? So this is all I'm trying to see from USC football. Gap scheme stuff, pulling the tackles and the guards. Love to see that stuff. Got to keep that going. Quick game, option game. I don't think you need to empty the playbook. We shouldn't have to empty the playbook here either, man. We should out-talent and out-scheme this team. Like I said, this team is not going to lay down, so we're going to have to compete at the highest level. And it's a faceless opponent at the end of the day. That's how you have to play football, man. Doesn't matter if you're playing against some YMCA schmucks, you're playing against Alabama, you're playing against Notre Dame, whatever. You should show up and compete against yourself and do the best job possible with preparation leading up to the game, practices leading up to the game, and ultimately, that work showing on Saturdays. But yeah, I expect, destruction from this USC team. I'm going 48-13 as my score. And yeah, man, that may be low, but I'd rather be wrong, and I want this team to surprise me even more. So if we could throw up another 60 ball, another 70 ball, that would be fantastic. But yeah, man, that's what I expect, and that's what I hope to see from our USC Trojans this Saturday. So that's it for the preview. If you guys enjoy the content, please like the video. Please subscribe to the channel. Man, if you're on the internet, just show somebody love, man. Too much negativity in the community, bro. I'm just a fan of this team just making making YouTube videos, bro. I don't think I'm special. I don't think I know it all. I'm just out here having fun. From 0 subscribers to nearly 1,500. It's the same me, man. I appreciate everybody that supports me. Have a good day. Get after it and fight on.